The purpose of the following experiment was to observe and explain fluid phenomena around miniature leviathans, meaning scaled-down versions of large sea creatures. Experiments were performed during both laminar and turbulent regimes of flow. Here we see a demonstration of the dimensions of the miniature leviathans. Here's the octopus, shark, and the electric eel. A calculation of the Reynolds number relative to the length scale of the sea creatures, about 7.5 centimeters, at a flow corresponding to a 5 Hz fan frequency was performed. The result is a velocity of 7.5 centimeters per second and a Reynolds number of 3000. This leads us to expect laminar to transitioning flow. Here we observe flow around the shark. Rhodamine dye is used to help visualize the flow. The dye was introduced near the nose of the shark. A laminar boundary layer is present near the head until the dorsal fin area. Around the pectoral fin, or side fin, it is interesting to note the adverse pressure gradient behind the fin, which causes circulation. Circulation can also be seen behind the dorsal fin, or back fin.
Here we see flow around the electric eel. Luckily, the eel was friendly and did not shock us. The folds of the eel's body trapped fluid, showing much recirculation. It is also easy to see that the shape of the eel's body tripped the flow into turbulence, which is characterized by the heavy mixing that can be seen as the flow passes the tail. Here's the octopus. While an octopus does not usually swim with its tentacles spread in this way, the shape made for some interesting flow characteristics. Stagnation occurs near the start of the octopus's head. Under the head, a clear zone of recirculation caused by an adverse pressure gradient is clear. There are also many eddies behind the octopus, probably induced by the tentacles.
We will now look at the same flows again. This time they have been slowed down using video technology. Using slow motion, some of the flow characteristics are easier to see. On the shark, if one looks closely immediately behind the dorsal fin, flow circulation can be seen. Once again, an adverse pressure gradient creates a wake around the pectoral fin. Vortex shedding near the tail fin is clearly visible, and the bigger whirls fade into lesser whirls as the vorticity is dissipated due to viscous effects. Once again, flow around the eel is seen. The major thing of interest is the flow circulation between the head and the first fold of the eel's body. There is a stagnation point in the mouth of the eel. The folds cause perturbations in the flow. On the octopus, a laminar boundary layer formed to the head geometry is very nicely demonstrated. As the flow approaches the underside of the head, there is a separation which leads to a recirculation zone. A great deal of mixing is also caused by the tentacles in the region directly behind the octopus. The rod collar used to attach the octopus could have caused some flow disturbance.
The experiment was repeated with the same parameters, only the velocity was increased to 23 centimeters per second, as the fan frequency was cranked up to 15 Hz. This led to a Reynolds number relative to the Leviathan dimensions of 10,800. The flow is expected to be in the turbulent regime. Around the shark, we can see that the boundary layer no longer has a laminar profile. The boundary layer hugs the body tightly until the flow has fully transitioned to turbulence, where the boundary layer vorticity causes heavy mixing of the dye. Recirculation zones exist behind the dorsal and pectoral fins. Vortex shedding is also present near the tail edge of the pectoral fin, and these vortices dissipate much more quickly than in the laminar example. Here we see the eel again. Once again, there is heavy mixing within the folds of the eel. The scale of the eddies seems to be greater compared to the laminar example. The effects of the mounting rod on the flow can also be seen, as it creates an adverse pressure gradient to the flow. With the octopus on the bottom of the head, we see that the transition point for the boundary layer has moved closer to the leading edge of the head. Behind the octopus, we can see steady and predictable vortex shedding. It is very important to note that the mounting rod has some severe effects on the flow around the leviathans. In all cases, it caused disturbances in the boundary layer regions around the sea creatures. Now let us revisit the turbulent flow captured at slower video speed. The transition between laminar and boundary layer flow is very evident around the shark. Notice that the point of transition is right around the leading edge of the dorsal fin. Also seen is the mixing near the second dorsal fin on the lower side of the fish. It is also interesting that the shape of the shark is advecting flow below the tail. The eel is re-examined. At the slower speed, it is easier to see that the recirculation between the head and the first fold of the eel. The vortices that are shed behind the eel dissipate very quickly due to the eel's shape. In slow speed, notice again the very prominent mixing under the head and the clear periodical vortex shedding caused by the tentacles. Looking closely at the shedding behind the octopus reveals the alternating pattern characteristics of vorticity. The major changes we see between laminar and turbulent flow are the heavier and more thorough mixing due to vorticity and faster dissipation due to viscous effects. The scale of the vortices is also greater in the turbulent regime. Flow around the leviathans is very interesting, and many different fluid phenomena can be observed by experimenting with models in a water channel.